screen.
All right, we are now recording. Welcome once again to Whiskey Congress. We have multiple beverages to talk to you about today before we get into stories and other fun stuff.
It is a clusterfuck on our
It is a clusterfuck of different beers on our table. So another beer from Dave from Philly, Goose Island Islay, aged 18 months in a Scotch barrel. Or 17 months in a Scotch barrel, sorry.
Okay.
First of all, thank you, Dave. We appreciate you sending these things. And
all right, so everything to this point has been good, and I've enjoyed. And Dave reached out and just said he wanted to make sure that we knew he was just offering something different. So
Right.
And I appreciate that. But this beer, if I had to describe it, the description would be like used motor oil.
Someone spilled scotch in my motor oil, so I drank it.
Right. I mean,
it's big. Oh my gosh.
Big is a way to describe it. Terrible is another.
It's honestly,
I can't do it. It's bad. I mean, I'm gonna finish what's in my glass out of respect for the booze, respect for Dave, respect for the idea of something being aged in a Scotch barrel. We love Scotch whiskey here. We're actually drinking a whiskey from the Islay region of Scotland today that we'll be talking about. But this beer, that's what we call a November Golf at West Point, a no-go.
A no-go, okay.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's just too much. It's very heavy. Now, Dave warned me that this one was going to be interesting, and I intentionally gave you a short pour when I first saw it come out of the bottle, and you're welcome. I'm going to get through the rest of the beer again.
How are you going to
as a team? I'm a team player.
I literally feel like I could pour that maybe. I probably couldn't even pour it in my lawnmower because it might gunk it up. Like it looks.
It's big. It's heavy. And I agree with it. It's not my. I mean, you can taste the woody barrel flavor.
You can taste the woody barrel flavor.
And the smoky.
But I mean, one, it's only aged 18 months, which compared to whiskey, which is aged for anywhere from 3 to 20 years.
But this has other things influencing.
Right. I mean, it's just I can't do it. I finished what you poured me, which was all of 3 ounces or whatever, and it's still on my tongue. Like I feel like I need to like.
I would say this:
stick my tongue in the water.
If I was smoking a cigar and it was cold out, I could. I'm trying to find reasons. All right. So then we clear the palate. Then we move on to our whiskey. Why don't you introduce that?
All right, so up on deck, what we have in terms of a whiskey is the Cal Isla. It is aged 12 years. It is from the Islay region, as I previously mentioned. It is, I think, unique in the fact that it is a peated Scotch, but the peatiness is subtle.
As I say, it's tame.
It's
not like Lafroig or Lagavulin.
Right. It doesn't come out and punch you in the face. You notice the smokiness to it, but it takes you a second. I think you almost have to double take. You step back and
let it linger. Let it linger, as they say.
And it has a lot of kind of burn actually initially on the tongue, which is interesting for. I think it's only a 43. Yeah, it's a 43% alcohol. So. Something like that typically doesn't have a lot of burn. Now, the burn isn't something that is too distracting and you get past it. And once you get past it, and once you reconcile the smokiness and the peatiness, you start to taste some of the flavors and some of the flavor notes that come out, which are a little bit more fruity, some nuttiness to it as well. The wood, per usual, it's the benefit of using the oak barrels is that you pull some of that wood flavor, and I think overall it's got a good flavor profile once you get past that initial burn that you get. And I'm not sure why that is. You usually, like I said, you don't see that in 12-year-olds for whatever reason. You do in this one.
I agree with your description completely, and I really like it. I've never had a Scotch that I said, ooh, that's too peaty or too smoky. I really like those characteristics. But this is good. I give it a 91.
Okay, so I gave it a 90. And the only reason I don't rate it higher, one, I'd like it to be, like for that burn, I need it to be a little stronger, right? I need it to be, 46 or 48% alcohol, to just kind of justify that initial, sting that I get on my tongue from it. But all in all, I think the flavor profile is really good. It is something that I don't know if this isn't what I would consider like an everyday sipper, something that I would drink every day. This will go on my shelf at home, and it will be, something that I go to every now and again. I'll probably have this bottle for a while, just because I'll kind of skip around. It's not one like I have. I won a bet with a college buddy. I tend to make a lot of bets based on whiskey and food. It seems to be a winning combination. I should turn it into money, right? But
yeah.
This is just a lot more fun. So I won a bet with a buddy of mine that I went to college with and played football with. He's from Boston, and that face, man. Yeah.
Sorry, I tried to power through the rest of the bad beer. And,
I mean, it's not a bad beer.
That was not a beer. I should not have chugged that. That was
right.
That was
it's not a chug beer, and we're not going to call it a bad beer. It's just a beer that doesn't taste good to us.
Yes.
But I won this bet with my buddy, my teammate from college, and we had bet on the Cavs in the Boston series, like last year.
Okay.
Right, like so last year at the end of the basketball season, Cliff, me and him are texting back and forth when the Cavs are playing the Celtics and everything, and the Cavs obviously go on to win, and so when the Cavs get Kyrie, when the Celtics get Kyrie, at the end of in the off season last year,
right?
He texts me immediately and says, Celtics beat the Cavs in the conference championship, in the Eastern Conference Championship, bet a bottle of whiskey on it. And I'm like, I'll take that bet all day. We've got the best player in the world. You've got the second best player in the world who didn't want to play underneath the best player in the world. I'll take that bet. And so the series happens, and Kyrie's hurt, Hayward's hurt, and I kind of gave him like a lifeline, like, hey, with the guys being injured, like, is our bet still on? And he's all gun ho, fuck yeah. And then obviously series goes 7 games,
right?
And so the Cavs were an incomplete team to say the least. But when you're the best player in the world, you can carry a team to the finals, which LeBron did. But LeBron also carried a new bottle of whiskey into my home. So thank you, LeBron and company.
So if you were making a list of LeBron's accomplishments, it would be the MVPs, the titles, the 8 consecutive finals appearances, and a bottle of scotch in my whiskey cabinet.
Right. Like if I were going, like when they put
not in that order.
When they erect his statue, I'm like, hey, guys, let me just get this on the bottom of the plaque here. A bottle of Ardbeg Corey Vrecken for Steve. Thank you.
Okay.
That's what I would put on the plaque.
Except it's not.
No, that's not the bottle.
Okay.
This is a different bottle.
Okay, well that story would seem.
Follow the fucking story, Jim.
I don't know. All right.
Keep up.
We're moving on.
Keep up.
Moving on.
I'll move you on.
Yeah. Whatever. So we got to talk this week in Trump again because he had the summit with Kim Jong-un. Got a lot of flack from the left. I said before, and I'm staying in the same boat, where anytime you say we're not going to talk to someone because of whatever, you're shooting yourself in the foot. So a lot of people are saying, well, we didn't get a good end of this deal. We're not going to get much from a first contact with a really deranged guy, if I can get away with calling Kim Jong-un deranged. This could be a step in the right direction, and in my opinion, it really can't hurt. I mean, the whole thing about you're giving him legitimacy. He gets legitimacy from his own people at the point of a gun constantly, and he has almost no legitimacy in the rest of the world. We didn't suddenly create a...
No, I disagree. And that's where I disagree with everybody on this. Everyone's saying you're giving him legitimacy.
I'm not saying that.
No, not you. I'm just saying, like, people are saying that by Trump giving Kim Jong-un a stage, this somehow legitimizes him. Well, listen, I'm sorry. We've been talking about North Korea on a weekly, monthly basis in the mainstream media in some way, shape, or form. We've been talking about North Korea as a threat to the U.S., to that region of the world for the last, 40 years, right?
I mean, certainly it's gotten ramped up in the last 10.
You're right, it's gotten ramped up in the last 10 to 20.
Yeah,
20, definitely 20. So this whole idea that you're giving them legitimacy, like, listen, if you're going to talk about someone in the news cycle the way that the media talks about him, then he's been legitimized to a certain degree, right? Like, I mean, I mean, respect amongst like, let's stop with some of this, old school. These are the formalities. We do this because this is the way it's always been done. That thought process, it's bad in sports. And it's bad in politics. Doing it just because that's how we've always done it.
That's bad, yeah.
Right. I mean, it's a bad way to think. And I wrote about this earlier this week on our website. You can check it at whiskeycongress.com. I'm neutral, and I think you and I are kind of in the same boat where I'm not going to beat Trump up for doing it. I don't think he gained a lot. I don't think we lost anything. I don't think North Korea really gained anything, and I think there's a little asterisk to this where, people are talking about, North Korea's nuclear program, and I think, one, they've got their nukes that they've already put together and developed, allegedly, right? I mean, people are very confident that they've got them, and I'm not so sure that I'm so confident in that. There's some people at high levels that disagree about what the capabilities are of the North Korean nuclear arsenal. There are some people who will come out and say, oh, they've got 11 armed nuclear missiles that can get from here to fucking Guam, allegedly, supposedly.
Right, and that's the thing is they ran a bunch of missile tests to scare the world. I think people know that they have nuclear capability. They didn't know whether or not they had the ability to weaponize it and get it as far as the United States or whatever. But as we said before,
and I still don't know, and we still don't know if that's accurate or true, what they have or what they don't have. We just don't have. The intel on it is vague at best, and so I think that's something to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is a mountain collapsed in North Korea back in September of 2017. Okay, there was a mountain like that, and it ended up collapsing on their main missile testing site. Right, and it's like where they test and do a lot of the development. This mountain collapsed, and before that, and the reason why the mountain collapsed is because they did a test that was basically they let off a nuclear bomb, okay, to some degree, and it ended up being 10 times as the seismic impact was 10 times that of what happened at Hiroshima, right, the bomb that we dropped on Japan in World War II. So my theory is, they did more damage to themselves than they're ever going to let on or admit, but they also backed themselves into a corner where they're like, all right, shit. We basically have, one bullet left in the chamber, and they've got an entire arsenal focused in on us. I think as much as you want to say that Kim Jong-un is deranged and crazy, he's not dumb enough to go, before he was willing, he's they were on their way, they were getting close, and they had the nukes, and it was, we're going to negotiate the hard way. We've got nukes, you've got nukes. Now, they got maybe a few, and they don't have any way, they don't have a way to develop more. People want to say that they have more testing sites. Listen, North Korea is only so big, right?
Right.
And I don't believe that they've got 7 testing sites on this fucking peninsula where they're ramping up nuclear, research and development.
What I've said to you many times, and we've argued a little bit about it, and we've bantered a bit about it, but the thing that I don't know the answer to is, does Kim Jong-un know the reality of the world? When he says, we can do this and we can rain fire and whatever, does he know that he's not invincible and that if there is ever a massive military conflict that he will lose in glorious fashion? I think he probably does. I don't know that though. I mean, he could be so deluded by his own bullshit and his own ego that he does not know that. But I'm wondering if maybe that's part of what's driving this, is he's realizing, okay, I've been pushing buttons and making my threats, and I think eventually he's got to be worried about his people turning against him. I think that's got to be a constant threat to him, or constant concern of his. Now, he keeps them very well oppressed with.
I don't think he's worried about it. I think now, should he be? Yes.
Okay.
But is he? I think where he's delusional is that aspect when it comes to his people, right? And that's another whole other conversation about kind of the summit and about the North Korea situation is the human rights aspect of it. And my whole, I wrote about it a little bit in that, Trump didn't bring it up, Trump didn't reference it. There was no even sort of hinting or intimating that, Kim Jong, you got to treat your people better at some point. And in fact, they kind of gave him a, hey, we're going to support your regime and allow you guys to stay in power. As long as you guys do what you're supposed to do, everything is good. I believe that it's a negotiating tactic. I believe that in time that, over the next, 3 years or, 2.5 years, maybe even 7 or 6.5 or whatever, if he gets reelected, I believe in time they will begin to breach some of these topics like the human rights things going on the peninsula, right? I mean, and people are making a big deal about the video that Trump showed, right? It was a video with condos on the beach and all that other stuff. And people are making fun of that, but I actually thought that was a good tactic, right? That's what Trump does. He builds and sells real estate. And so he's doing what he's good at, and he's saying, look, he got a design, he got a model, and he showed it to him, and that wows people. And a guy like Kim Jong-un, who wants to be a part of the mainstream, he wants to be treated like a rock star, he wants to go places and get accolades and attention. This definitely catered to his mindset and the way he thinks. And so I think it was a good move, and I think that it also signals that, listen, if you want this, you can't have prison camps with 100,000 people in them that are starving to death, that you're beating, right? Like, you're gonna have to get rid of those. And by get rid of them, we don't mean kill everybody in them and then bury them. Like, you're gonna have to do something, humane and civil, and you're gonna have to bring your country up.
You're doing the carrot and stick.
Right. I mean, to a certain degree, like, you see these condos, you see how they've got electrical lines, and you see how they've got internet and cable lines and all that other sort of shit. Well, you're gonna need infrastructure, and we can't build infrastructure over mass graves. So you're gonna need to do some things to get your country to a place where you can have tourism and you can have resorts and you have so much to offer. You can be just like South Korea, but this is what we need from you. And I think that's what he was doing, and I will commend him on that. I kind of wish there was a little bit more, hey, you're really fucking your people over here. So can we work on that as well, right? I mean, because he got him to say, we'll work towards denuclearization. So why not say we'll work towards not killing our own people en masse, right?
Yeah, I mean, in giving Trump credit, I'm saying basically he broke a long spell of silence, and hopefully this leads to more progress. Expecting this to get wrapped up in one was silly, but something caught my eye on one of my conservative friends on Facebook posted an Infowars, article that said Michelle Wolf on her new show on Netflix took a poll, and 71% of liberals want the North Korean negotiations to fail so they don't have to give Trump credit. And of course, the Infowars spin on this is liberals hate America so much that they'd rather see us fail. I'm not even going to point out how many times that sort of shit was done to Obama. I'm not even going to go there. But I was curious. So to take one for the team, I actually watched an episode of Michelle Wolf's Netflix show. And I actually think she's kind of funny. I thought she was great at the Correspondents' Dinner. Her show is so tired. It is so cliche. It is bad. At least based on 2 episodes that I ground through to see this. But I wanted to see, is what Infowars reported actually true? And it was. They did do that. It was in a segment they called, like, Get Real or To Tell the Truth or something. I forget the segment. It was only done within her audience of however in her studio audience, but they asked a live question and said, yes or no to this. And I mean,
what was her response?
She didn't. She just asked the audience. She responded by saying, so you'd rather have your house blow up than have Trump succeed? Okay, I guess that's what kind of demographic I am. So she had Neil Brennan on with her, and they made a joke about it. She was not encouraging that kind of thinking. But
so she didn't do anything with it. She just took the poll
and then moved on to the next. Made a joke about how fucked up it is if people would rather have their house get taken down by a nuclear weapon than give Trump credit.
And I think so. Before you go any further into what sounds like an awful show,
it was bad.
Let's just talk about that mentality, that
That's where I want to go. Yeah.
the mentality of I don't like the guy in charge, so even if what he's doing is for the benefit or the betterment of the country, I want him to fail because then if he fails, then I can say, aha, I told you so. That was the mentality with a lot of conservatives with Obama. That was the mentality with a lot of liberals with Bush. That was the mentality of a lot of conservatives with Clinton, and so on and so forth. Now, I was too young really for Bush one and Reagan, but I mean, I saw it more. I really started to recognize it with Bush. I really started to recognize it with, I mean, I completely understood it with Obama, and I'm seeing it again with Trump, where people on the left, there's this hashtag resistance, right? We are the resistance, and no matter what Trump does, no matter what he says, it is, they will fight him tooth and nail, everything, they will have a contradiction for everything that he says and does. Now, part of the issue with Trump, right, and I think you have to be able to separate it, and this is kind of where I think me and Mike Wood bump heads a little bit, because I can appreciate when Donald Trump does something positive, worthwhile for the country that is working, and that makes sense. Now, he's only been in office for, you know, a year and a half, going on 2 years, and so, you know, having a conversation 6 months ago, it was like, listen, you know, I can't give him credit for anything, and it's not because I won't, it's because it's only been a year. We don't have enough data to say if anything he's doing is actually working, right? I mean, like, he was taking credit for things that were happening the day that he took office. It's just like, all right, listen.
Unemployment's the lowest it's been.
Right.
You're like, good. You haven't done it in a day.
Right. I mean, like, come on now. Let's be sensible about this. You know, but now things are starting to vet out. The economy is definitely up. Yes, he inherited an economy that was trending upward with Obama, but we're seeing the type of
GDP.
Yes, I work with, so at work I work with an architectural firm that's GPD, and then obviously we talk politics, and then we're talking about gross domestic product, and so I get them mixed up all the time. But we're seeing that type of we're seeing 3% and reaching towards 4% GDP growth, and that's impressive, right? Because a lot of people in Obama's camp said, you'll never see that, and this is why, right? And they tried to explain it, and then this group comes in and says, we disagree, and we think that we can't get it there, and these are the sort of things that we're going to need to do. Now, a lot of the things that they had to do were cut back on a lot of regulations, most of them environmental, that have had an adverse effect, obviously, on the environment, but then on people who kind of live in some of the poorer neighborhoods based on where they're positioned in relation to some of the manufacturing and things like that. So the benefit is the economy's up. The bad thing is that people who live in some of these neighborhoods are having to deal with the effects of that, like immediately, right now, in real time. So, you know, you have to look at the whole thing. You can't just take this is the point that I like the most and focus on it. But I think that people have to begin to really think about what's important, right? Like, you're so obsessed with this guy who tweets and says inappropriate things, right? Is that what we want out of our president? Not necessarily. I would love it if my president were respectful, spoke intelligently, stayed off social media, or if he was on social media, he was engaging and enlightening, threw out some supportive things, right? He can be conservative, he can do everything that he's doing, right? He can do all this stuff without being an asshole, right? I mean, at the end of the day, every policy that he's implementing, every single thing that he's doing, everything that he's doing, that's, whether you want to gauge its effectiveness or not, he can do all that without being an asshole. And I think that's my criticism of him, is like, listen, I wish that you could just be a better person, right? And then we'll judge you on the merits after. Like, I can't judge you during, because there's not a lot that's going to happen during the presidency that I'll be able to tell the effect of right then and there, right? So I'm going to have to judge you on your effectiveness after you're done, or much further into your job. But while you're doing it, I just need you to be less of a dick, right? Like, I mean, I don't think that's too much to ask. And even if you're not, even if you can't accept that as Donald Trump, and you have to continue to be a dick, but you get the economy to a place where, you know, you're reducing poverty and people are working, and, the vets are being taken care of and all this stuff is getting better, then fine, I will slap you on the back and give you whatever accolades you want. But I will still say, yeah, and he was a dick, but he still did what he needed to do.
The reason I brought this up is I wanted to say that that mentality is the exact problem that I bitched at conservatives about for the entirety of the Obama administration. And flipping the switch and saying, I'm going to do the wrong thing back because you did it to me, has become essentially the go-to in our society, and it's fucked up.
But I don't think this is because they did it to Obama. Like now this is
a
blind rage of
it's
they're
doing
the same thing. They're doing the same thing. And
I'm not saying it's the same exact problem.
I get it. It's the same problem. It's not. They're not saying, well, because you did it, we're going to do it. They're just they're doing the same fucked up thing. They're using the same mentality that conservatives used with Obama. And now the beauty of this is I was listening to Breitbart on my way into work. I think it was Thursday, and there was a guy on who oh my god, I can't think of his name, but there was a guy on who he openly admitted on Breitbart. He said, "Listen, I'm guilty of this. When Obama was in office, when he did things, and he named two things specifically. When Obama basically got Osama bin Laden, he was pissed. And he was pissed because Obama was going to get credit for it, and it was a good thing, and he didn't want a good thing to go on Obama's record. And the other thing was when Obama, extended the olive branch to Cuba.
Right.
Right? And he said that this, and I've thought this for a while, and he articulated it very well, but what he said was, listen, what Obama did with Cuba is no different than what Donald Trump is doing with North Korea right now.
Yeah, that's...
the difference is...
The countries are very different.
The countries are very different, but listen, there's a lot of similarities.
Yep.
And you can make a lot of similarities between the two countries, and maybe they're not that dissimilar. Castro was not a nice guy.
No, he was not.
Che Guevara was not a nice guy at all. I mean, Che Guevara was literally the red hand of Fidel Castro. Like, people romanticize him, and he's this revolutionary. Like, he was a fucking murderer.
And both Fidel Castro and not Kim Jong Un, but his predecessors had legitimate reasons to have a beef with the U.S. I mean, we had a war in Korea shortly after World War II, and that ended very badly for everyone. And that's the war that really doesn't get talked about as much as the others, but like
because it fed directly into the Vietnam War, yeah. And so people kind of forget. People forget that technically the Korean War isn't over. There was an armistice, but that war is definitely not over.
And the Vietnam War was technically never a voted on war, but then again, we don't.
Well, neither was Afghanistan.
Yes, we don't make Congress approve wars anymore. We just change the title and do it, which is unconstitutional and fucked up. But anyway, so the leadership of North Korea had a.
I may not have this whiskey as long as I thought.
Yeah, we both had an accidental overpour today. This was great about our show. But yeah, and we tried to kill Castro on multiple occasions. I mean,
yes.
That doesn't justify him being a murderous son of a bitch, but it does explain why he might have a beef with us and why he wasn't so eager to play nice with us.
Right.
People get funny about multiple attempts to murder them by foreign governments.
Right.
Yeah, have a sense of humor, Fidel.
Ease up, buddy.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so I think we're on the same page where people need to be. And a lot of these people you're not going to convince. And listen, I'm not. This isn't me saying. This isn't me kneeling down to President Trump and saying you're the best ever and I love everything that you're doing. There's a lot. Listen, all sides are playing games. All right. Now, people may not like the term games, right?
I think it's the right word
because it's life and death. But literally, these people are playing games. They're playing chess. Everyone is making moves. Whether it's Democrats, whether it's Chuck Schumer or Nancy Pelosi or Bernie Sanders, they all have ulterior motives, all of them. And it's not always in the best interest of the American people. Some of it is about money. Some of it is about specific constituents that they want to please. Some of it is about big business, in corporations. There are a lot of competing variables that all of these people are using and pitting against one another to create this sort of mass confusion, this overload of information to the point where people throw their hands up and say, fuck it, I don't care what you do. And that's the response that they want so that they can kind of gain the control that they're looking for and manipulate things the way they want to manipulate them. That's what everyone at the top right now from a political standpoint is edging for, is getting people to a point where people just don't give a fuck and they can do whatever it is and the people at the top can do whatever it is that they want to do. That's why whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, a liberal or a progressive or a conservative or whatever you want to call yourself, all these labels are so much a part of the fucking problem. Because the people at the top who are pulling the strings, the puppet masters, that's what they want. Because you are doing, and you're making their job a hell of a lot easier by partitioning yourself off and not being able to look through things and not being able to figure out the actual good, the actual bad, right? Like you label, and then you will go out and then you'll just take that label and label, good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, without even thinking it through.
I was talking to a coworker this week about about health insurance, because like me, she's an independent consultant, so you have to deal with your own insurance. And she was saying she pays like $600 a month in healthcare coverage, which is a lot. It's a lot more than I pay. Now my coverage stinks. I don't pay that much a month, but basically I have a plan that gives me essentially nothing. I got my teeth cleaned. I had to pay 100% out of pocket for getting my teeth cleaned.
Yeah.
But basically my insurance policy is if I get more than $10,000 a year worth of bad things, they'll cover it. So I'm basically yes. I'm basically it's a stopgap against a health disaster happening to me,
right.
And that's it. But what I was talking to her about, and it turned out I was preaching to the choir, but the original concept behind Obamacare was an ultra-conservative heritage. The Affordable Care Act was originally a conservative approach. It was the Heritage Foundation's freaking baby, and then it got Obama's name on it, and then instantly became evil, and fucking morons came out and said, grandma's going to be in front of death panels, and just the arguments against Obamacare were defeatist to what's for the best for the American people. And if Congress didn't play these games and divide us, and all politicians, but Congress is who I put the most blame on.
Congress and the media.
And the media too. Yeah.
There's a fair share of,
stoking the fire.
Right, all of it. Because, Breitbart wants to talk about the mainstream media and how they're, doing the people a disservice. So are you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Breitbart, you're pushing your agenda. You're pushing the things that you believe in. You're intentionally. And I don't want to get into that.
But this is the same concept. You're just going to say, oh, what you're doing is bad. I'm going to find something bad to say about it. And Trump apparently saluted a North Korean general, and people are like, imagine if Obama did that. And I agree. The right would have gone berserk, but that doesn't make it okay for the left to do it. And so anyway,
the key. I think the one thing that we just have to get back to as in the world of political discourse is objectivity. You have to be objective about things. You have to take the information, put it up against known actual factual data, and figure out what makes sense and what doesn't. And at some point, and there are certain things that aren't going to make sense. I don't care how much data you have. Some things you're just not going to be able to explain. Right? I don't care how many scientists you put in a room, how many statistical analysis experts. Some shit is just not going to be. We're not going to have a good explanation for it, and we deal with it. But most of the stuff can be figured out, discerned, determined by just using what we know, using information, and using it the right way. And that's not what's happening right now. Everything is driven off of emotion.
It seems like it's getting worse. Maybe I'm just being grouchy old guy, and maybe it's the fact there's so much shit out there now that the world has changed so dramatically from a generation ago.
Not even. The world has changed dramatically from fucking 15 years ago.
Right. Okay.
But you don't have to go that far back.
social media, between 24/7 news, between the ability for, I mean, the fact that you and I have a voice in media, granted not as big as some of these other ones, but we have that.
Right.
And we have it with, if you're watching this, with not the most sophisticated setup. I mean, we're doing okay. But, the point is, we generally, I think, do a very good job of holding each other accountable to honesty or whatever, and we're both basically honest people, so we don't have an agenda or a political spin that we're going to die on a hill for. But a lot of these other folks do, and it's making rational discussion in this country harder and harder, which is why I enjoy doing this. How's that for a self-promotion? All right, 2 more things in the news, and then we're gonna have a little bit of fun. Paul Manafort's in jail. He pissed off a judge badly enough to get him to say,
Witness tampering.
Yeah.
Like, it's actually perfectly believable. It makes sense. This guy, this sketchy lobbyist, lawyer, political guy, fucking around with Russia and the Ukraine, and then of course he tries to tamper with witnesses when he gets indicted. So he gets indicted, he gets another charge and goes to jail. I mean, listen. I think the whole thing with, I've said this multiple times. I don't think Donald Trump or his son or anybody like that had a call with Vladimir Putin and said, hey, give me whatever help you can to win me this election, and if you do, I'll give you special treatment when I become president, and I will, bend over backwards to enrich you, Vladimir Putin, and Russia. I don't believe anything like that happened. I don't think that, I don't. I think what happened was the Russians were meddling in our election because we've meddled in their elections. I think the Russians wanted to cause exactly what they did, and that was division, racial division, political division, division between gay people and conservatives, division between men and women. They just wanted to create a mess, and they did. Good job, Russia. You achieved your goal. The other part of it was, I think that the Trump team were inexperienced in American politics. They're experienced in business, but they were inexperienced in American politics, so they assumed that what worked in business worked in politics. So, yeah, sure, I'll take a meeting with whoever. I mean, listen, people call me all the time. I get calls from commercial realtors and bankers and all. I'll take those calls, right? But when you're running for office and you're representing the people, you can't always take those calls, and you have to know how to separate yourself, and you have to know how to use middlemen, and you have to know how to use back channel networks to communicate and figure out if things are legitimate. And then if they are legitimate, you almost have to either publicize them, or they have to be done in a back room where no one's going to find out, right? I mean, that no one ever finds out, right? And this
which that back room where no one finds out is a lot tougher to do today than it was.
It is, but it still happens.
Oh, sure.
It absolutely still happens.
But shit leaks out. If it's literally 2 people, then you can pull that shit off. If you have any,
right? Once you go beyond 2, I mean maybe 4, it does get tough.
Yeah.
But the point being, they were inexperienced in how this game of politics works, and it left them open to, all these various things from Putin and the Russians and everybody else, right?
And whatever's special interest, right? Everyone's got a reason for wanting a piece of this.
Exactly. And so I think what happens with Mueller is but I think what happens is Mueller's going to do this report, and what's going to happen is it's going to be Manafort was working with anyone who would throw money at it. It's going to be the general. Flynn. Flynn had moments of weakness where, he was a veteran, he was a general, he had done all this for his country, and he needed money. And so he took it, he made a mistake. It was relatively minor, but nonetheless, he did the wrong things, and he's pled guilty, and he's paying the price for it. And then there may be a couple other people, Cohen, I'm sure. I mean, but Cohen is Cody Cohen is just a grimy guy, right? Cohen is what makes lawyers look bad, right? He like people think
There's
that
too many
he's-
obvious jokes in there for me.
yeah. I mean, but Cohen, I mean, people think that he's this linchpin, that he's gonna have all this sort of information that proves that there's collusion and all these other fucking things. Nah, he was just a dude who was out there.
Quiet the porn stars and.
He made money. Like Trump got him for a reason. He was a shitty lawyer who looked the part, who Trump could pawn shit off on. Hey, literally, he was the you handle my dirty work guy, right? People use that as a joke all the time, right? Like people, like small guys will hit me on the shoulder. Hey, big guy, you handle my dirty work, right? That really annoying joke that guys do all the time. It's just like, or I could break your face. How about that? But anyway, Cohen is that guy where Trump said, you handle my dirty work and I'll make you a very wealthy man. And he did. Cohen blew a lot of the money, right? And then he had some shit go south for him with this taxi cab thing and all this other shit because Uber and Lyft basically fucked him on that one. And then he decided that he wanted to make himself a superstar once Trump kind of rose to power, literally. And so what we're going to find out is he was just a guy who was trying to take advantage of his position in Trump's team and put himself out there and expose Trump and made Trump vulnerable because of his own hubris, right? Like that's ultimately what's going to be or what's going to become of Michael Cohen. I can just tell you that right now, right? I mean, it's not going to be. We're not going to find out anything. It's not going to be anything mind-blowing where Trump was conspiring with Vladimir Putin. It's all going to be shit where Michael Cohen put himself out there to be more than he actually was. He maybe borrowed money from people he shouldn't have borrowed money from, or gave money to people he shouldn't have gave money to, or quieted porn stars, or whatever he did, but none of it is going to lead back to Trump in collusion and conspiring with the Russians to take over the world or take over the United States or whatever. It's just not going to happen.
All right, you're probably right. But well,
You want a bad bottle of whiskey on?
No. But I do think Manafort going to jail does change the tone of things, right? Because he was manipulating things. Now he's going to be much less free to do that. And regardless of...
it doesn't change the tone for me.
Doesn't? All right, to me it does.
This is who we... We knew this is who Paul Manafort was. Right? This doesn't surprise me. It's not shocking. I think everything stays on course. I think this is an additional charge for him. He'll end up going to jail for a few years longer than he was already going to jail for. But this isn't gonna... Paul Manafort is trying to cover his ass. He's not trying to protect Donald Trump. He's trying to cover his ass, his own ass.
But here's why it changes things to me. The possibility that he gets pardoned prior to being convicted is...
Not gonna happen.
This one, I'm not so sure about. Because if
First of all, he needs to get convicted to be pardoned.
Okay. Well, I'm sure you're right, but I'm not sure that there won't be an attempt to circumvent that.
Okay.
And the reason, because, look, if you put me under house arrest, I'm not going to like it, but I've got my Netflix, I've got my, whatever, I'm going to deal. You stick me in jail, I'm going to get really unnerved really fast, and I'm not used to living nearly as comfortable a lifestyle as Paul Manafort.
Maybe.
I've been
I
on this stupid diet for almost a month now, but if you give me jail food for like 5 straight days, what I'm doing now would seem sumptuous. And
agreed.
And
I'll agree with you on that. But I don't know Paul Manafort's background. I don't. Because there's some guys who, there's some guys who have risen to power and fame and fortune who come from backgrounds where they can deal with this shit. I don't know his background, right? Like you take like a Flynn, you throw a guy like a Michael Flynn in jail, and he's a fucking army general. I'm sure he can probably fucking deal with it. A guy like Manafort, I don't know. I don't know. I feel like
he strikes me as a guy who spent a lot more time.
He also strikes me as a guy who would end up like fucking Kingpin in Daredevil. I don't know. Did you watch that?
Never saw Daredevil. No.
Oh, so good.
Is it?
Oh, so.
I'll add it to my. I'm.
Daredevil and the Punisher.
I
love it. Jessica Jones.
I just rewatched.
And Luke Cage. Anything Marvel.
Okay. This took a turn. I just finished rewatching Californication, which is a show I love. The final season's garbage, but seasons 3 and 4 were great.
I don't need to watch it. I fucking love it.
Californication.
Ohio fornication.
Yeah. Okay. Have you ever seen? Did you ever watch the show?
No.
Oh, okay.
I
It's
told you
great.
this
All
multiple
right.
times.
All right.
I'll start watching your shows when you start watching mine.
Deal. I'll watch Luke Cage and you watch Californication.
Fine.
Actually, what was the one you just recommended before Luke Cage?
Daredevil, The Punisher, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage. Watch
Okay.
them in any order.
Okay.
They're all sort of semi-connected. But
How many seasons are out there?
So Jessica Jones 2 seasons, Luke Cage 1 season, but season 2 is coming. Daredevil 2 seasons, The Punisher 1 season.
Okay.
The Punisher.
And that's based on the character that was done by Thomas Jane in one movie and
It's
Dolph
based
Lundgren?
Off of
Right.
Marvel's comic
Well,
book, The Punisher.
Right, but there were two
Thomas
movies.
Jane's version of The Punisher doesn't exist. It was so terrible. It was so bad. It was an affront to any fan that likes comic books. All right, the fact that you're gonna put Thomas Jane as the fucking
All right,
Punisher.
this is getting recorded.
He
This is getting
couldn't.
recorded.
I don't give a fuck. What is
No.
Thomas Jane?
If
What
you
is-
do anything to me over bringing up Thomas Jane, it's going to be cut.
Was Thomas Jane gonna come here and fight
No,
me?
no,
Come and
no.
fight me.
I'm saying if you lose your mind,
I'm gonna
punch
punish
me.
you, Thomas Jane, for trying to be the Punisher. How dare he even showed up for the audition, and even worse, that they casted that dickbag as the Punisher. It's unfucking believable. Unbelievable. That is literally like that's like casting me to play Tiger Woods. That is what that is. That is casting me to play Tiger Woods.
The Tiger Woods story starring Steve.
Sorry, this black dude is not Asian
It
and
does-
is
it doesn't-
100 times bigger than Tiger Woods and can't play golf.
And can't play golf. Other than that, though, you could nail it. All right, so we talk about police misconduct all the time on the show, and today, last night I watched Bill Maher's.
Actually, we don't. We talk about it when it comes up.
Okay, well,
And it comes up
a
more
lot.
than it should. But
So Bill Maher did a bit on it. I just want to say it's worth watching. He just did his final, new rules was about police misconduct, and he showed multiple videos. He's talked a little about Sterling Brown, but showed a video of like 2 or 3 cops tackling a woman in New Jersey. She's in a bikini on the beach, and they're punching her in the face. And
black woman, white
white woman. And they I mean, I don't know what happened before. I don't know what happened, that led to it. But I don't fucking care. You can't have multiple police officers jumping on a civilian and wailing on them.
Well, did you see the video out of Arizona?
The black guy that got attacked.
Right.
Yeah,
He's leaning up against the wall.
Bill Maher showed that one too.
I mean, the dude's leaning up against the wall with his phone, and then they just like, all right, well, we'll just punch you in the face and ram your head into a wall, ram it into the door.
And in that video, Bill Maher said he was accused of, preparing for a physical altercation, which apparently, if you're black in America, means standing up.
Right, I mean, it was just like, well, and I read that. The officer said, well, it looked like he was bracing himself up against the wall, preparing to fight. And it's just like, well, if he's bracing himself on the wall, it means he's not going to be able to come at you, right?
That's what bracing, yeah.
Right, like, so.
You're bracing against the wall so no one gets behind you.
Right, so that means that as long as you don't go towards him, there's really no fight to be had, based off of what you're telling me.
Right.
And so that one really irked me. Watching that video because they were there on a domestic violence call or something like that, and there was another guy that had been like arrested and cuffed or had been detained in some way, shape, or form on like around the corner, right? And then he was there and he was on his phone over the rail. They come and they're just like, all right, we want you to go stand up against the wall. He goes and he stands up against the wall and he's on his phone or whatever. And then I think it looks like they told him to sit down, and he didn't do it fast enough. And I think he kicked a foot up on the wall or whatever it was.
Right.
But I mean, it was nothing, right? Like he didn't do anything, right? He literally didn't do anything. He was just a dude standing up against the wall, and then they literally beat the shit out of him. And cuffed him, dragged him, banged his head on, like literally there's at the end of the video.
I only saw like a 10-second
So
clip,
at the end of the video, like they get him down, they beat the shit out of him, they cuff him, they pick him up, and they're taking him out. There's a door right there because they're on like a patio. And as they're going through the door, the one officer just slams his head as hard as he can into the door, right? The guy is cuffed with his hands behind him, right? Like they're basically, controlling him. He doesn't have control over his body at this point. because 4 or 5 officers are carrying him, and they just bang his head on the door for no fucking reason, right? I mean,
I mean, here's the thing. Now that we have cameras everywhere and body cams, you know, naively, I believe that would make the world better. But now we're at least seeing what's happening, and you know, we say it all the time. I'm not anti-cop, but I am anti-system that doesn't.
I'm anti-shitty cop.
I'm anti-shitty cop.
I'm anti a system that doesn't fucking call out shitty cops.
I don't. Right. It's one thing when these guys go to trial and end up completely being exonerated or whatever, which bothers me tremendously. But in this case, I'm never the guy that says, you know, one mistake and you deserve to lose your job. I'm very much not that guy. If you are entrusted with public safety and you are given the power to take away someone's freedom and potentially take away someone's life, and you commit an act like that, you have lost your trust as a cop, in my opinion, for good. There's things I cannot do in my profession, and I'm sure there's things you can't do in your profession, where, like, if you do this, you don't, in my business, working in an FDA regulated environment, there's something called being disbarred. So if I commit an act that leads to, there's something in your profession.
There's something in my profession called being disbarred.
Yeah, right. But literally, I can get put on a list where the FDA says you have violated the public trust to the point where you can't work in this industry anymore. And acts like this should get the equivalent treatment in law enforcement. I don't care how amped up you were. I don't care if you were, you know, the fact that you were riled up from the energy and testosterone and adrenaline from what happened a minute ago does not give you the right to beat the fuck out of a citizen just because, well, they're there and I've still got, you know, my energy going or my adrenaline going. So whatever the legal repercussions will be, I don't know. I'm not optimistic that anything will come of it. But what has to start happening, 100%.
I know a couple guys were suspended. I'm not sure if they were actually fired. And I think that, listen, you got to get fired. And yes, here's the thing.
And again, I hate saying it, but yes, you do.
Yeah, you know what? You do. Right? Like, you got a badge, you got a gun, you are like, you have been given permission to take life if you need to. You have been given permission to uphold law. You have been given, you know,
you can take someone's freedom based on your
right.
judgment.
Even if
it's only temporary.
And you're charged with protecting property on all levels. So there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that job. And this idea of because, you know, the push from the other side is that there just should be this blind allegiance to the police, to the military, no matter what they do, no matter what they say. If you say anything against them, then you're a bad American, and you don't appreciate what they do for you, and you don't know what they do for you.
Right.
And my argument is, go fuck yourself. I know plenty of what.
Not the strongest argument.
No, I don't give a shit. My argument is, go fuck yourself. I know exactly what the Army does. I know exactly what the military does. I know exactly what our police do. And I do appreciate it. And I recognize that if something happens and I need to call 911, there's a pretty good chance that they'll show up, right? I mean, the reality is that they that's the other part, right? They're like, oh, you call 911. Guess what? Sometimes there are places in this country where you call 911 and the police don't show up. Right. They don't show up.
But if you have
now where I live, they'll show up, right? And
sure.
They'll definitely show up, and they'll show up en masse. I'm sure in a fucking SWAT car, in a tank. But you know, I mean, I have nothing fucking else to do. But I mean, there are places where you call, right? Where I use here, you call 911 over here, where you live, and there's a 70-30% chance that the police may not show up, depending on how busy they are that night. Right, I mean, like, we are in Cleveland proper, and I'm not saying because this is a bad neighborhood, but there are sketchy neighborhoods not far from us where we're at right now, where shit is going on, and there's a chance that your call, no matter what it is, short of I'm being murdered, the police might not show up for an hour, you know, or 45 minutes. Which, no matter what is happening, that you're calling 911, anything more than 10 minutes is too long, right? Like, so this whole idea that the police are infallible, and you know, if you don't praise the ground that they walk on at every given second, then you're a bad person.
You're anti-law and order.
No, it's not. I'm very.
I'm not saying you are. I'm saying that's
right. But what I'm saying is that we're not law and order. But to a certain degree, yeah, we are law and order. And if law and order applies to me, then law and order applies to the people who are supposed to uphold the law. Period.
Right, absolutely. It should be to a higher standard, and clearly it is not. And this is another thing that maybe it's not any worse today than it was 50 years ago. We just see more of it, but that doesn't make it okay. Right?
I mean, listen,
we don't know.
50 years ago, the police were allowed to beat the shit out of black people just because they were.
Well, but they kind of still are.
Right, I mean, but now,
True.
I mean, at least now it's a little bit more subdued, but, I mean, and I think the reality, the other aspect of this is that you have to think, so there's a couple different ways to look at what's happening with police interactions. If you look at the total number of police, and you look at the total population, and you look at the number of interactions that the police have with people every day, and you say, all right, listen, if we have a 4% of the police interactions with people in the country are bad, but the rest of them are go by the book, are fine,
right.
There's nothing to talk about, then we'll take a 96% win rate, right? But then when you think about the number of people in the country, the number of police, and you do the math, and you say, all right, 4% of 300 million is a whole bunch, right? I mean, it's a lot.
If I successfully cross the street without getting hit by a car 96% of the time, I'm dead in a month.
Right. Right. So let's not do that.
That needs to be real close to 100%.
Right. I mean, and I guess that's been one of my biggest arguments against the people who will sit there and tell you that, listen, going specifically to, police killing unarmed black men, right? That's only, it's only like 50 black men, and they kill more white people than they do black people. In total, the police only kill 1,000 people a year. I'm like, well, and I've said this on this show, I've said this on anything that I've written on Whiskey Congress about the topic. Why the fuck are we so comfortable with the police killing 1,000 people a year?
Right.
Why are we so comfortable with it? Right? I mean, if you want to sit there and tell me, and listen, to a certain degree, I'll tell you, around half of those people,
I wouldn't say deserve, but
not deserve.
But
I mean, listen, if you're sitting there with a shotgun aimed at a police officer and he shoots you, then I'm not going to say that you didn't deserve to get shot.
Right.
I mean, if you're actively shooting a gun at a police officer, then by all means, fire away, officer.
Yep.
If you're sitting there holding a goddamn grenade or something, or whatever, or you're about to slit the throat of your wife because she cheated on you and the officers are there, or if you're holding a gun or whatever, there's certain situations where that's the nature of the job. It's the world that we live in. People are crazy, and sometimes the unthinkable has to happen, which is why they've got a badge and a gun.
Yep.
Right?
And it is why we.
So of those 1,000 people that die every year, half of them, it is what it is, and it absolutely sucks.
My closing statement on this is, a lot of people, and I've said this, and I still believe this, will say that, well, it's only a very small number of cops who are these bad actors. Fine. Then let's work together to get rid of them. And you know what? And this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in a good way. Now, I know people will say the system is so clearly designed to not get rid of them, which is part of the problem. But if that culture changed, it would stop. Then the job of being a police officer would be a lot easier, because there wouldn't be that distrust and that bad blood. I mean, it's going to take time for it to go away no matter what.
Right. I mean, all of this, whether if you're talking about gun violence and fixing the issues with gun violence, it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take 10, 20, 30 years to fix. The issue with the police in the inner city and black people, that's not going to happen overnight. That's going to take
a generation,
years. Right? It's going to take a generation, right? You systematically locked up an entire generation of black people. It's going to take a long time for our community to begin to trust and understand our relationship with you, right? I mean, that's just the way it is. And if you want to say, well, the reason why we lock so many of you up is because of drugs and because of guns and because you guys were okay, fine. But you guys had your part in it too as the police, and both sides have to work on it. And if you're going to sit there, and if your only answer to the problem is it's all your fault, whether you're the police pointing your finger at black people in the inner city, or if you're the inner city black people pointing your fingers at police, then you're never going to get it fixed.
Right.
Right. And both sides have to clean their own house. Right. If the police said, all right, you know what? Let's just clean up. If you're an asshole and all you do is beat on black people and throw innocent kids in jail, or arrest kids for weed and beat the shit out of them and charge them with things that you just make up out of blue air, or you connect them to crimes that they're not connected with, then you gotta go. And then inner city, you gotta say, listen, if all you're doing in this neighborhood is selling drugs and recruiting young kids and young boys and young men and recruiting girls to prostitution and living in a shitty, dangerous house and having crackheads live in your house and you're killing people and you're hurting people, then you gotta go. I don't care where you go. I don't care if you go to jail. I don't care if you go to fucking Aruba. I don't care where you go. But you can't be here. And you gotta go. And then if both sides start to clean their own house, then all of a sudden, when they come back together, things are a lot easier. Things are a lot better. All of a sudden, if you've cleaned house and you can get rid of, and you can internally get rid of the bad seeds and the bad apples, and you can start to generate education within your own community. Look at how the Jews operate, look at how Asians operate, and working on educating themselves from within and building their own communities within and saying, fuck it, we can't depend on or rely on anybody else on the outside. We're gonna have to do it for ourselves. The black community did that, right? And closed ranks and said, we can't worry about anything else except for what we're doing and our focus and our energy. And then by the time that they, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, you look up and all of a sudden you've got thriving black communities all over the place where all of a sudden you don't really need police.
And black communities aren't just black communities. Black people are in communities in general, though we don't have segregated communities.
No, we have very segregated communities.
No,
but
that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, I'm saying getting away from that, when making that so that.
Well, we don't, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know what there's some black people who like, they don't like the idea of Jim Crow and segregation, but they also don't want to deal with white people anymore.
But that's a trust thing, right?
Right, exactly. That's exactly what it is. They literally don't want. There are factions of black people who go as far as they can to not deal with white people in general. They're like, listen, nothing good ever comes of it. Fuck them. I'll figure it out on my own. And I was listening to the radio, satellite radio. There's a woman who has a yoga retreat. It's a 10-day yoga retreat, and it's on an island somewhere outside, somewhere in the Caribbean.
All right.
And
this is a black woman, I'm guessing?
It's a black woman, and she does this yoga retreat for only black women. Like, if you're a white woman, you can't come. And white women try to come, right? Because white women love yoga.
They love themselves.
They love themselves some yoga. They're like, a yoga retreat in the Caribbean? Fuck yeah. And she's like, fuck no. And her reasoning for it is, it's for black women to have a safe space to deal with their own issues, whether it's race related or not, deal with some mental health issues, work on, kind of healing themselves, work on the, actual yoga, and have a clear, and if their issues are race-based, whether it's from work or relationships or whatever, they can air them, and there's not a white person there to get offended or get annoyed or offer some sort of explanation or counter argument to, which I completely understand, right? I mean, like sometimes you just want to express yourself without having someone say, yeah, well, but it is kind of your fault though, because you being black and all, right? Like sometimes that shit just like gets fucking annoying for black people.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Right? And so I thought, I was just like, yeah, well, I totally get it. Now, it's something that, I think, again, you do this sort of self-segregation thing, and there's benefits and there's minuses to it, and if that were to catch on mainstream, and then all of a sudden, all right, well, we're self-sufficient, and we're segregated, and we're all working together, my whole thing is it's like, all right, well, we've also, kind of made ourselves targets.
Well, but, to me,
based off of history, I got plenty of reason to think that.
You're not wrong.
Y'all don't have the best history with us.
That's why my how things get better solution is not just, yes, things in currently predominantly black neighborhoods where, the economic situation is usually worse than average and where police situations are often a big part of the problem. In my ideal, how does this get better? We all melting pot the thing and just, you live in a very white neighborhood now. You're comfortable there, right?
Enough.
Okay.
Enough. I mean, truth be told, I'm comfortable enough. My neighbors are nice. The police there are okay. I've been followed a couple times. I've been pulled over. I'm okay. I'm very aware of where I'm at, and I'm very aware of who and what I am, and so there's a certain level of cautiousness that I just will have for probably a while, depending on how much I choose to be involved in the community. But there are just certain things that I will just never do because it's just not worth the risk. And there are too many horror stories of black guys in white communities who get accused of X, Y, and Z just because somebody needed a bailout and there's a black guy, and so they tell some sort of made up story and then a life is ruined. Literally just Google black guy falsely accused, right? If you go into Google black guy falsely accused in suburbs, you'll read some stories that'll literally ruin your day. And so, with where I live, it's something that I'm blatantly aware of, and having a daughter, there's certain things, if she wants to have a sleepover, and her friends are all sleeping over, I'm probably not going to be at the house. I will most likely, whenever that happens, and you kind of started to pick up on this, whenever there's a lot of kids over at the house, and I leave. And that is not because I hate kids or whatever, it's just that I don't want anyone to be able to say that I did something inappropriate or there was something improper or something like that. So I try to distance myself and space myself from that. Even with the sad part is, even if it's, I got a lot of white friends, and even if it's with their kids, it's still, my daughter and my best friend, his daughter, they play together all the time. When she's there, I stay away. And it's just, part of it is too many episodes of Law and Order, maybe. But then the other part is just, it's the reality. If you're a big black dude and somebody does something they're not supposed to do, they can easily shift the blame to you, and the justice system's not going to do me any favors. They don't care that I'm a lawyer. They don't care how well-spoken I am. They don't care how funny I am. They don't care...
You're not that funny.
About... this is coming from a terrible comic. They don't care about the weights that I lift. At the end of the day, I just end up becoming another statistic. So I try to remove myself from that, and that is just the reality of the world that I live in.
Yeah, I understand. I get exactly what you're saying, and I totally understand the idea that, the bottle too. I don't know the look of me claiming to know what you're saying, or me drinking your whiskey.
This look is all about the amount of whiskey that's in that bottle. No, that's in that bottle.
And how much it started with, okay.
It started full.
All right, yes, it did. All right, we could probably do show after show about this. We've been going over an hour now. I want to talk about two quick things. One quick thing. Phil Mickelson today had a meltdown in the U.S. Open. It was absolutely hilarious. I like Phil Mickelson.
Okay, so here's the deal. I hate the U.S. Open. I like golf.
Okay, you hate the U.S.
golf
because it intentionally humiliates golfers? Why do you hate
Yes.
this? Okay. I kind of like that.
I don't. You know what? I'm not good at golf. I do like the sport, and occasionally I hit a good shot, and that kind of brings me back to it.
That's the curse of golf. Yeah.
But I do like. When Tiger was at his best, he got me into it.
Okay.
As a not white guy playing golf, that was kind of cool to see. Realizing that it wasn't just
Tiger
changed, and that's good. And that's fine.
Changed the perception of golf. Absolutely.
And so, and after that, I learned to play to a certain degree. I never got any good at it, but I can respect and enjoy the sport. Occasionally I'll play. Now, anything I do sports related is mostly related to powerlifting, because powerlifting is frankly not gonna take me very far, but it's gonna take me a hell of a lot further than fucking golf.
Well, and at your age, you're not going to join a semi-pro football team and deal with the hours and the time.
Right. But anyway, but I don't like. I mean, when I watch golf, I want to see good golfers golf good. I don't want to see guys hitting fucking 20 over or 10 over. I don't want to see Tiger Woods at 10 over. That's not enjoyable golf to me. What happened with Phil? Tell me what
So, all
happened.
right, so he barely makes the cut. He's not doing particularly well. He was going to try to supposedly fight his way back into the mix. I am a fan of Phil Mickelson.
Lefty.
I think
That's annoying to me.
What, that he's a lefty or that I'm a fan of his?
No, left-handed people in general. That's annoy me.
Weird.
I know it's weird. I know. I know.
Okay.
It's so
Interesting
weird, right? Like, yeah, my boss at work is left-handed.
Ah,
and
I'm not a
it
fan.
fucking drives me nuts.
Use
your right hand.
So anyway, Phil on the 13th hole of the third round makes a putt that I would have been embarrassed by. He just must have just misread it. So it veers.
So he made a putt.
No, he took a putt.
Oh, okay.
He took a putt, and it's veering way past the hole and way wide of the hole. And he literally runs 5 steps while the ball's still moving and smacks it back towards the hole.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes. He did something that if you did it in work scramble, people would go, yes, yes, yes. He literally jogs towards the ball, turns around.
Phil Mickelson has won a Masters.
He's won 5 majors.
He's won a Masters.
Yes. He
Listen, I know kids in high school who know, you can't, okay, so if you don't know golf, one of the things you can't do is after you hit it once and it's moving, you can't hit it again.
I'm pretty sure Phil knows that rule. I mean, like I said,
What is the penalty on that?
2 strokes.
That's
So
it.
yeah, it's a 2-stroke
I mean,
penalty.
2 strokes is a lot, but still, I mean,
Yeah. Well, there's times I'd be better off doing that. Like if I'm putting from 40 feet and sending it 10 feet past, I'm gonna miss the next 2 putts. I might as well run up, stop the ball right at the edge, and go take the 2-stroke penalty and tap it in.
I would love to see. I would actually like to watch
Watching
you
you chasing down a ball.
chase a fucking ball down. I mean,
Steve, it was just so.
I would take bets. I would take bets
here-
with the caddy
so-
on you blowing something out. Achilles, knee.
That's just unnecessarily mean. It was to see Phil Mickelson do that, and then the announcers were besides themselves. It was classical, comical, and I guarantee you, it will be all over sports talk for the next 2 or 3 days. He's gonna get killed in the media.
I can't believe this, but this happened today, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I've been in my yard cutting grass and weed whacking and doing all the shit you do when you live in the fucking suburbs or anywhere in the fucking yard. So I missed it, but
You will be hearing about it.
I have to see it. That's so idiotic.
When you see it, you will know that my description is dead on. That he literally 5 quick steps, runs and blocks the ball. What's that?
2 shows.
Oh, we want to do 2 shows? Okay. All right.
Behind the curtain.
That was not the greatest.
Sorry. I couldn't figure out how to articulate my
You
fingers.
did not articulate.
I was trying to do sign language, and I was
okay. So let's wrap this up.
I held up 2 pieces.
Yeah. Thank you. You're not a crook. All right. So we'll throw some bonus Whiskey Congress to you. We are at Whiskey Congress on all social media. We are Steve at Whiskey Congress and Jim at Whiskey Congress by email. Please keep the emails coming. Keep the tweets coming. You've been tweeting actively lately. Some good, some not so good. Well, we're not so good. Anyway. So thank you again, Dave, for the beer. Sorry that we couldn't.
Hey, Dave, thanks for the motor oil. My lawnmower is now running great.
We're out. Thanks a lot.